Hello, and welcome to this session of Working Efficiently with Oracle. In today's session, we will be covering the remaining part of the Oracle architecture. This slide talks about the series objective. In today's session, the focus is on the process components. We will be talking about the various process types, the client process and the Oracle process, and the different types of Oracle process. We will be talking about the server process and the various background processes. Just to give a recap on the Oracle instance, the Oracle instance is a collection of background process and memory structures, and it is only using an instance that a user or an application can connect to a database. So we have seen in the first session about the various files which make the Oracle database. In the second session, we have seen about the various memory components that are involved. In this session, the focus is going to be on the process. When we talk about process components, there are two types of processes. Now before going on to process, just for our understanding and for the sake of simplicity, a process is a set of steps that are executed. In layman terms, for us to understand, let us assume that a process is a program. It's a piece of code that executes. So when you look at the different types of process available with respect to an Oracle database, you have client process and then you have Oracle process. A client process is also called a user process, and this is a process that interacts on behalf of the user program with the Oracle database. On the other hand, Oracle processes are those processes which run on the database server. Now these can be further classified into server process and background process. We will be talking more about these things in depth in the coming slides. So moving on to what a client process is. As said earlier, a client process is a program that interacts with the Oracle database on behalf of the client application. Now, when you make a connection with the Oracle database using any kind of application technology such as J2EE or .NET or PHP or anything else, or you're trying to connect to a database using one of the database tools like SQL Developer, Toad, SQL Plus, etc., there would be a process that is spawned on behalf of the client, and this process would interact with the Oracle database. So this particular piece of code which acts on your behalf and interacts with the database is referred to as a client process. Just to make things simpler, in this diagram you can see that there are three different types of client systems, and then there is a database server. So your system could be running any kinds of programs. So there are some background processes which are available on the server. This is something that we would cover a little later in detail. So there would be a client process which is spawned when you try to connect to the database, and to handle your requirement there would be a server process that is created on the database server side, and this server process would interact with the database and service the requests of all the client processes. That is something that you're seeing in your slide right now. Now, moving on to an Oracle process. These are processes which are running on the Oracle database server. To appreciate this, probably you would need to look into a Linux or a Unix box, because in a Windows environment, all these processes are implemented as threads, and you would see them under one executable, which is oracle.exe. Now, these processes are on the database server side, and they interact with the client process or the user process, service the requests, and provide the results to the client process. When we talk about the Oracle process, there are two types of processes that are present. One is the server process and the other is the background process. The server process. The server process is a process that interacts with a client process. In simple terms, it services the request from the client process. Now, for every connection that's made to the database, a server process is spawned, and depending on the type of connection, whether it is a dedicated server connection or a shared server connection, the server process services the request of the client. When we talk about the server process, there are types: dedicated and shared. So here, as you can see, this is a diagram which talks about a dedicated server process. As you can see in this diagram, you have a client process that is associated with the server process, and that is servicing the request using the database. When we look at the shared server process, you will see that two or more client processes share the same server process. This typically happens when there is a crunch for resources, or the clients do not need too much of processing capability on the server side. So what does a server process do? A server process is critical for the functioning of a database. The first and foremost function of the server process is the SQL execution, which means an SQL request which is received from a client is handled solely by a server process. So the parse, the execute, and fetch, all these functions which are part of the SQL execution are primarily the responsibilities of the server process. Apart from SQL execution, PL SQL code execution is also handled by the server process. In case your data is not present in the database buffer cache before being displayed to the application or the client, it is the responsibility of the server process to request the requisite data blocks from the disk to the database buffer. Finally, the server process is also responsible for returning results to the client or the user process. Now, moving on to background process. Background process are those processes which are started when an instance is started up. So each of these process has a specialized function, and again there are different background processes. The background processes are essential for the functioning of a database. When you talk about categories of background process, there are mandatory, optional, and slave process. Mandatory, as the name suggests, are those processes which need to be running on the server for your database to function. If any of these mandatory process crashes, your database will also crash. Optional, as the name suggests, are those processes which are running an additional functionality is required. And then slave process are simply processes which help service the other process. Moving on to mandatory background process. The slide here shows the various mandatory background processes. You have the process monitor, which is also referred to as the PMON. You have the listener registration process, which is referred to as LREG. You have system monitor process, SMON, database writer process, DBW, log writer process, LGWR, checkpoint process, CKPT, manageability monitor process, MMON and MMNL, and recovery process. Now these are processes which keep running in the background, and depending on their usage, they may or may not consume system resources. Let's move on to the first background process, which is the PMON. The PMON is a process which is primarily responsible for process recovery. So assuming that there is a client process which has made a connection to a database and is being serviced by a server process, in case due to any event where the connection is broken, either due to network defect or the uh, hardware problem or anything, it is the responsibility of the process monitor to do the process recovery. So what does the process monitor do? The process monitor is responsible for database buffer cleanup, which means that if this server process has used some of the database buffers, whether the data is modified in it or not, since the process is no longer active, it is the responsibility of the PMON to clear up these database buffers. Pictorially, assuming that the shaded blocks are those which are modified by the current process, it is the responsibility of PMON to clear them when the process is no longer active. PMON is also responsible for releasing the logs in case there are transactions which have updated or modified data in tables, those tables data would be logged till such time either the transaction commits or rolls back. Now, in the case the process is no longer active, it is the responsibility of PMON to release those logs. In pictorially, this is how it would look. Also, it is the responsibility of PMON to release the undo segments associated with the transactions being used by this particular process. So as you can see, the shaded regions in red are those extents which are used by transactions associated with this particular process. Now, once the process is no longer active, it is the responsibility of the PMON to release those extents. The next background process is the listener registration process. The primary function of this process, as the name suggests, is registration with the listener. To illustrate this pictorially, assuming that there's a database server with a database instance running on it, any connection which is going to be made to the database is done through the Oracle Net Listener. Now, there would be only a single instance of the listener typically running on an Oracle database server. It is the responsibility of the listener registration process to register the dispatcher and the database with the Oracle Net Listener. So basically, in simple terms, the Oracle Net Listener is aware of the dispatcher and the database instance only through the listener registration process. Moving on, we're talking about the system monitor process now, which is also known as the SMON process. This is one of the more critical process needed for the database to function. So this is a process which plays a lot of important roles. The first and primary being instance recovery. Now, instance recovery is a state where the instance is starting up, the database is about to be opened, and Oracle discovers that the files are not in a consistent state. And if the files are not in a consistent state, then Oracle would not have the database open because the database always has to be in a consistent state. So if you look at this example pictorially, here's a state, a database in a state where it needs instance recovery. What SMON would do is it would try to apply the changes which are present in the online redo log files and see if this database can be made consistent. Now this particular phase is referred to as a roll forward phase. In case SMON is not able to use the online redo log files to make the database into a consistent state, then there would be a recovery phase that has to be done by the database administrator, and that would be referred to as media recovery. Now, once the online redo logs are applied, the database has both the committed transactions as well as the uncommitted transactions, because as you know, the online redo log files capture all the changes in the database irrespective of whether it's committed or not. As a part of the application of online redo log files, the rollback segments also get populated with data, and this would be used to roll back the uncommitted transactions. So this particular phase is referred to as a rollback phase, and at the end of this whole exercise you would have a database which is consisting of committed transactions, and this particular database is in a consistent state. So this is one of the more primary responsibilities of the SMON. It's referred to as instance recovery. In case one or two table spaces are not accessible because of corrupt files and media recovery is done only for those corrupt files, the database can still function with those files made offline. So in such an event, when those files are recovered, restored, and then made online, SMON is also responsible for transaction recovery associated with those particular files. SMON is also responsible for reclaiming temporary table space. So which means that when a user executes a query which is using a sort, or it uses a group by clause, or it uses functions, then Oracle would use the temporary segment in the temporary table space. So reclaiming the space is a responsibility of the SMON. Finally, coalescing continuous free space, getting together all the free chunks of data that's available so that they can be allocated for the next space request. That is the responsibility of SMON with respect to coalescing free space. So pictorially, if you look at this, you can see that there are two segments in which one segment has one block free and the other segment has two blocks free. Now, even though you are seeing a scenario where there are three blocks free for allocation, Oracle will not be able to allocate this to any segment that is requesting for three blocks. It is SMON's responsibility to coalesce and provide the three blocks as a chunk so that whenever there's a next request that's coming for two or three blocks, Oracle can use this particular chunk to distribute to the particular segment. The next background process is the database writer. So its primary function is to write modified buffers from the database buffer cache to the data files. So please note, this does not write all the database buffers. It only writes the modified or the dirty buffers from the database buffer cache to the data files. Pictorially, uh, what you see here is the database buffer cache. The shaded regions are the modified or the dirty buffers, and these are being written to the data files on the disk by the database writer. So when does a database writer write to the data files? When it is signaled by a server process. Now when the server process needs database buffers for it to populate, and it finds that the buffers are used or are being used by other sessions, then it would signal the database writer to write some buffers to the disk so that it gets some free space. Database writers also is invoked when the checkpoint has to be advanced. When we mean a checkpoint has to be advanced, a checkpoint is a process that we will be looking at in a later slide in the session. So just note that a checkpoint is an indication that changes till that particular state are already present in the data files. So this event would actually push the database writer to write the modified buffers back to the data files. The next process is the log writer process. This is an important process like the database writer, and its main function is to write part of the log buffer to the online redo log file. So pictorially, as we have seen in the earlier session, a log buffer is a circular buffer. It's a very small buffer compared to the database buffer cache, and log writer keeps writing the log buffer and redo records from the log buffer to the online redo log files on the disk. When do we invoke the log writer? Whenever a commit is issued, log writer writes the changes to the online redo log files. So a commit means a log file has to be updated with the entries. Whenever a redo log switch takes place, log writer writes the changes to the log files. So a redo log switch is a scenario where a log writer has finished writing to one online redo log file and is going to write to the next redo log file. So in such a scenario, it will push for a redo log switch. Since when the log buffer is small and the entries are being written at a rapid pace, it also writes every 3 seconds. Or when the log buffer is 1/3 full. This is a scenario where log writer writes entries to the online log file. Also, whenever the database writer writes modified buffers to disk. So please note that whenever the database writer is invoked to write the modified buffers to the disk. First, Oracle will ensure that the corresponding redo log entries are returned to the log file. The next process is the checkpoint process. Now, in simple terms, a checkpoint is an event which uh, tells the database uh, that all the changes till a particular time are actually recorded within the data files. This particular event is also referred to as an SCN, a system change number. So a checkpoint uh, will actually go ahead and update the data file and the control file headers, informing that changes till a particular SCN are already recorded in the data files and the control file, and that for recovery, it will also give the information on the list of archive files from where the recovery should start. So the checkpoint process updates the control file header and the data file header with the checkpoint information. And whenever you raise a checkpoint, I mean, this can also be manually invoked by the DBA. The checkpoint process signals the database writer to write the modified blocks from the buffer to disk. So when this happens, automatically log writer also writes the changes. If you look at the diagram, you can see that log writer is writing the changes from the log buffer to the disk. You have the database writer writing the modified data blocks to the data files, and then you have the checkpoint process updating the control file and the data file headers with the checkpoint information. Next, you have the manageability monitor process. Now, from Oracle 10G, you have a lot of statistics being captured and maintained by the Oracle database software. Uh, Most prominent among them is the automatic workload repository, or the AWR. Now, the manageability monitor process is responsible for managing the AWR, populating the AWR. Whenever there is a violation or any alert has to be raised as per the configuration, it is the responsibility of the mmon process to bring up this alert. There's also a manageability monitor light process, which pulls the information from the SGA and writes it to the respective tables in the database. So most of the statistics that you see in the AWR are actually captured from the SGA or from the memory components, and they are populated in the AWR tables. There's one more background process called as the recovery process. This process is very similar to the SMON or the system monitor process, except that this is used more in in the case of distributed transactions. A distributed transaction is a transaction where you have more than one databases involved. So typically, what happens is you have this link, and the transaction happens through a database link. Now, in case the transaction fails, it is the responsibility of the recovery process to resolve such scenarios. So in case there is an activity that's happening on the database A, and database B is a distributed database. So the transaction which is modifying a transaction in database A, which is modifying data in database B, if it fails for any reason, then it is the responsibility of the recovery process to go to the database B, make sure that the associated temporary and the rollback segments are released, and resolve this transaction. Then you have the optional background process. These, as I said, depending on the functionality required, are enabled. You have the archiver process, you have the job queue process, you have the flashback data process, and you have the space management coordinator process. The archiver process, archives the online redo log files. So which means that when a log switch happens and the redo log file belonging to a different group is being written to by the log writer, then the first reader log file will be is being copied to a on to an offline storage by the archiver process. Now, the archiver also does an additional responsibility in the case of standby databases, where the archiver can be used to ship the logs from the primary database to the standby database. In the first scenario where it is copying online log files to the offline storage, this is critical for recovery. So this is the function of the archiver process. Next, you have the job queue process. These are typically spawned to run user jobs. So typically when you have a job which is scheduled using the Oracle scheduler, Oracle uses the job queue process to run these jobs. So you have a sequence that's typically followed for running user jobs. There is a job queue coordinator process which is started automatically when you have a user job that's scheduled to Oracle scheduler. This job queue process looks into the job dollar table, and it picks up the jobs based on the time. So if there's a job to be executed at a particular time, this is picked up, and it then goes ahead and it spawns job slave process. So the job slave process, which are also referred to as JNNN, are actually spawned by the job queue coordinator process to run the jobs. So each job slave process is dedicated to running the job, and once the job completes, the job queue process enters sleep state. So this is how the job queue process function. You also have a background process, optional background process called flashback data archive. The flashback data archive stores a pre-image of changed rows in track tables in flashback data, archives. So here, what you do is you kind of identify certain tables for which you want to track the changes, and uh, when you identify the track tables, any change that is made to this table, irrespective of whether it's committed or not, is stored. The pre-image of the change is stored in the flashback data archives, and this is typically used in flashback operations. Now, as you all know, uh, typically when you do a change to data, the changes, the pre-image of that particular data is actually stored in the rollback segment. So similar to the rollback segment, here in track tables, you are storing the pre-image of the changes in the flashback data archive. Now please note that depending on the retention of the flashback operation, uh, this data is retained in the flashback data archives irrespective of whether the transaction is committed or not. Then you also have space management coordinator process, which is also referred to as a CO, and this process coordinates execution of space management related tasks, which is space allocation and space reclamation. So this particular process spawns slave process dynamically, which I refer to as WNNN. Now, when we talk about the background process, the last category is the slave background process. When you talk about slave process, there are two types of process. One is the IO slave process, and the other one is the parallel execution server process. The IO slaves are processes that are spawned to help support other activities happening within the database. So in case there's a lot of backup that's happening, so Oracle would spawn off these IO slave process to help RMAN complete its job faster. You can also have slaves created which support the database writer in writing its changes from the database buffer cache to the data files. So these are two scenarios where you have slave process which are helping other functions. Then you have the parallel execution server process, the primary function being running single SQL statements. So in this scenario, what happens is the server process which is running the single SQL statement will spawn off a set of multiple server process which logically break the same data load into multiple data loads and operate on it simultaneously. So there is a parallel execution coordinator which is responsible for parsing, allocating the parallel execution server process. And once the data is broken into various data loads, each data load is processed by one parallel execution server process. And at the end, once this activity is completed, it is the responsibility of the parallel execution coordinator to send the results to the user, coordinate, collect, and send the results to the user. So this is pretty much all that we have from a process architecture standpoint. The next slide just talks about the entire Oracle architecture in a single slide. So this is a slide which has been which is available on the web. I mean, the URL of which is given below. And here's how the Oracle architecture looks. So you have the memory components, then you have the mandatory background components, then you have the database files which form the part of the database layer. And I think this is a fantastic representation of how the Oracle architecture looks. With this, we come to end of this particular session on the Oracle architecture. We do hope that you found the session informative and useful. Do share your feedback with us at the details given on your slide. Thank you.